Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Susan Brown, and I'm the National Account Manager with Bin Compactors. And we've been in business for 6 years. We're a Canadian start-up business that I think we're now moving into the teenage, young adult portion of our growth pattern. Some of you may have seen us. 5 years ago, we were on Dragon's Den, and we were successful on Dragon's Den, and that was awesome and very exciting, and that was the start of our significant growth. So what I'm going to talk about today is the forgotten waste area. We're not as exciting as drones. Certainly drones and garbage, I don't know if you've got a choice between the two, but we do bring a lot of value to your buildings, your properties, your tenants, and some of the issues we can help you deal with. So let's look at some of the issues that are forgotten about in our poor waste areas. Staff injury due to load height. This is a big one. And many of you have seen how high some of your staff have to reach, or your tenants, or your customers, to get the waste up into their waste bins, whether they're different styles of container. There's quite a high load height involved in getting the waste up. In Ontario, we track injuries due to things like workplace equipment that's not properly designed, and things like high lifting causes about 60% in total of musculoskeletal injuries, as well as slips and falls from broken bags, as well as other things like having to reach up and climb up and then fall off things like randomly, constructed stairs. So that's a huge issue with waste areas. And when you're looking at the design of them, you have to address that part. Animals and pests. Of course, animals and pests are a huge problem. Whether they're large animals or small animals, they are still a big issue. And some of this is that they're attracted because of the odor issues that come from the waste areas. And of course, the only way often to fix this is to relocate the animals, which is a big challenge. Waste servicing costs. Often these things don't even come into play until suddenly they're out of control. And when you've got open top bins, waste servicing costs can creep up. Now, the waste industry has long been based on route densities, and there are options that you have to impact that portion of the waste cost that is impacted by the numbers of times you have to have a site servicing visit. So that's another issue that we see in our poor forgotten waste area. Odor, of course, is a big one. We've had customers that have drive-throughs. We've had retirement home properties where the front door, where the new visitors are coming to evaluate the facility, they can smell the garbage from the front door as they're approaching. So that's another issue that people have to deal with every day with their properties and with their tenants and their customers. Large animals, of course, it's always cute when you go online and you Google all these interesting bears and dumpsters videos, and you see, bears pulling dumpsters down a main road as they're taking them away to empty the food out of them. But in the reality of, our world, bears, raccoons, and other animals, possums, etc., and of course, mice and rats are not a fun thing to have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. The interesting thing about the rodent side of it is everybody's reading articles about how the rodent population is growing in our cities, our urban areas, and this is more an issue related to climate change. So this problem will just continue. It's not that we all suddenly got messy. So that's something to think about as well. And the only way usually to address this is to seal your waste, to not allow it to be exposed to access. And of course, our cute little raccoons. They're really cute, but they're not that cute when you're up close and it's 11 o'clock at night. So how do you get efficiencies? For most haulers, the model is based on approximately 60%, give or take, depending on the area, is the disposal weight of your waste. And then 40% is the site servicing. So there is where the efficiencies can come in. If you're looking at ways to improve it, you can impact that 40% by reducing numbers of pickups. You can't change the disposal. How much waste you bring out of your building is still going to be that weight, whether it's in 5 trips to lift it or whether it's in one larger trip to lift it. It's still going to be that amount. Customer service, it's a huge concern to a lot of companies. One of our largest customers is McDonald's Canada, and of course customer service, when their drive-through winds around the waste area, it's very important to them. And it's a critical part of their customer service evaluations that the waste area be clean and odor-free. And so all of us have to think about that, whether it's trucks on properties, whether it's traffic, whether it's congestion, whether it's people can't get across into the Starbucks that's in your building because of the truck traffic. All of those things are elements that are really important and impact customer service. So they're important to think about. So let's talk about the dumpster. The dumpster actually came from Dempster dumpsters. It's first was coined as a term in 1936, which is a few days ago. And the Dempster brothers wanted to sort of find a play on words between Dempster and bin, so they came up with dumpster. And it's been around since 1936, so it's been around for a long time. It's definitely up there in the age of equipment. But of course we see this picture, which was, I'm not going to tell you where it was taken, but it was in Burlington. And this is not an attractive look, certainly not something that any of us wants for our properties. And then the market grew, and about 40 years ago, the vertical compactor was introduced. And the vertical compactor had lots of pros and cons. It offered the pros in that the haulers could just come in with their front load truck, which front load truck is the most efficient of the trucks that are out there. And they could just come in one drive-through without getting out of their vehicles. They could lift this bin or dumpster, and then they could move on to the next one. So that was very efficient, and that was a big pro of the vertical compactor. And of course, it offered the benefits of compaction. That meant you could, remember that 40% that's available for some efficiencies, you could reduce that by compacting the waste and reducing the numbers of lifts. But it also is high, so it started to have those issues of height and heavy waste and staff injury, and unless you had some places a staff of basketball players, it could be pretty difficult to get to it, particularly if it was an 8-yard. So it really has been a great piece of equipment in the marketplace, but it does have some shortcomings. And of course, the one access piece, as we've been required to enclose our waste in corrals and in garages, and in some provinces and some areas air condition it, then no longer can the driver just whip up, empty it. So it lost some of the pros that it offered initially. About 8 years ago, we started to see in-ground systems. There's a few of them here today. In-ground systems started from Europe, and the pros, of course, they offer are aesthetics. They're very attractive looking. They offer sealed waste, so they address those other issues I talked to, and they do offer basically a low load height. They are, however, not compactors, so you can't easily impact that 40% where you can get some efficiencies. And that leads us to our product, which is a high efficiency compactor, and it's called the Bin Pack. So the high efficiency means it's about double what's out there on the market today in terms of compaction capability. And it's got the low load height. You can see it's about at knee height on an adult. I can't stand back or you won't hear me. And it's sealed, completely sealed. And it has the benefit of being lifted by a front load truck. So you're not going to have it lifted by a proprietary truck or a crane or any of the other more expensive means of lifting. So I've got on the next slide a video. It shows you how easy it is to use, and the video is only about a minute long, so it'll just take about 65 seconds.
The Bin Pack compactor is easy to use. Open the door, put in your garbage, close the door, and press the start button.
Okay, that was pretty simple. And what we usually find is that people can basically train themselves with a little USB key that we give them of that video. And there's really not a lot more to it than that. The waste streams that can be used in a bin pack compactor are general waste, which with general waste you'll be looking at about 4-to-1 compaction if you have food waste in your garbage. And that's important because food waste is heavy. So that's why I'm specifying if you have food waste. If, however, you have a building that it's primarily an office building, you would be looking at higher than 4-to-1, 5-to-1, possibly 6-to-1. So how that number is interpreted is if you picture a dumpster, a 6-yard dumpster, everybody in here knows what one of those looks like. 4 of those, if you have a restaurant in your property, 4 of those 6-yard dumpsters worth of waste will go in one of these units. And then similarly, if you are just an office building without a lot of food waste, as many as 6-to-1 of the 6-yard dumpsters could go in. So take that 4 and multiply it by 6, that's 24 yards of waste in that little unit you saw, which is the footprint of a 6-yard dumpster on the ground, about a foot higher. So it fits in all the existing corrals, it's lifted by front load trucks, and there's not a lot you have to change. And a nice thing is there's no installation, just plug in. So it's really truly plug and play. You do not have to install frames, you don't need guides, you don't need excavations. It's really very simple to install. And that's a benefit for you later if there are any changes to your property. The slide up here talks about understanding the pros and cons, and I've been talking to some of those pros and cons, but understand it also from your perspective and from the perspective of the equipment, not just from your hauler's perspective. I always encourage people to involve the hauler in the decision and get them to make sure that they're part of the decision. Most haulers, I have found, will help out with an equipment change if they feel that you are getting the best choice for your business. So it's important to all work together, not sort of make the decision and then expect the hauler to retrofit it to what their needs are. Work together, but understand the pros and cons of all the options that are out there. So we talk about sustainable a lot these days. I mean, everything is, has the word sustainability attached to it. But really what the biggest sort of meaning is capable of being sustained. So something that you can go on with, that you can carry on with. And that's important when we look at the sort of definition of the 3 areas of sustainability. So we've got environmental sustainability. So that's things like truck traffic. The amount of truck traffic that is on your property, coming to your property, is doing things not just in addition to emitting carbons, it's doing things like degrading your pavement. So environmental sustainability, keeping a cleaner environment, not having a unit that leaks waste leachate, which is actually very corrosive, into the storm water systems. That's all part of environmental sustainability. Economic is that it makes sense. It's financially supportive of you moving forward and continuing to grow with it. And social, things like your neighbors. Think about having sort of a good neighbor policy, and sealed waste offers a good neighbor policy. So it's socially a responsible way of setting up your properties. So we talked about compaction a few minutes ago. This is part of the research. You have to understand what compaction is. I talked about it a few minutes earlier relative to 4-to-1 or up to 6-to-1. If it's cardboard, you can compact cardboard, and cardboard will compact at a rate of about 4-to-1. So if you have a property with 3 or 4 8-yard bins filled with cardboard that's being used with cardboard every week and lifted multiple times, you can bring that down to 1 unit. And that gives you back some space. Parking spaces, a lot of you will know the value of a parking space in Toronto. And when you do the math, you'll find that it's a sort of a common sense economic decision to make. How is your monthly waste bill impacted? Of course, when you do not change the total disposal weight over a month, that part isn't impacted. But again, we talked earlier, the piece that's quite a large piece, as much as 40% relating to site servicing, that part is impacted. So look at the pros and cons, look at the hard costs, the soft costs, your hauler contract. Almost every hauler contract allows for a customer-owned equipment change. A lot of people think it doesn't, but they do. And you have to, again, work with your hauler on that. So consider all these areas. They're all important. They're all part of your decision. They're all critical to having a successful choice that you can live with going forward. So we don't want this option. I think we all agreed on that at the beginning. This is not an attractive option for anybody, your tenants, for you, for your neighbors. Except maybe these guys. These guys love this option. We actually had a customer that came to us and they were being told by the Ministry of the Environment that they had a health hazard happening. They were down near Lake Ontario, the amount of bird excrement was actually crossing a line to unacceptable. So these guys may like it, but we certainly don't. Lots of options ahead. People think there aren't, but there are. So you have to always be aware, willing to look into it. Don't just let those hauler contracts roll over. Look into it and see what can you do, what can you reduce, how can you add equipment to make it a better environment for everybody. I've got some pictures here. These are a big sort of collage of McDonald's pictures. These are, as I mentioned, I think earlier, we have a very large customer in McDonald's. And so these show indoor placements. They show outdoor placements in corrals, etc. And those are across Canada. We even have them as far north outside in Fort McMurray and in Fort St. John in northern BC. So they're not really going to be impacted by weather. This is Yonge and Dundas Square, just near here. So when they have all those events in Yonge and Dundas Square, the BIA for that area, they use a bin pack compactor to get rid of all that waste quickly out of the area before the next event. This is an interesting one. This is grocery. We have a lot of grocery customers, including Whole Foods. And what they will do is they will put the bin pack compactor, because it doesn't smell, it's fully sealed. They'll put it in the middle of their warehouse, their food distribution warehouse, and they'll just pallet jack it to the receiving dock on the morning or afternoon or whatever the timing is that their truck comes, and lift it right from there. And it gives them a good option that cleans up the odor issues that they previously had been experiencing with food waste in the distribution portion, warehouse distribution portion of their stores. This is Fallsview Group in Niagara, and they have these in the basement of those big hotels like the Embassy Suites, and they've got them on stands. So those 3 units are doing the entire Embassy Suites in Niagara. So you can see how relatively small they are. The only reason they're up on stands is what you can't see is there's a raised dock behind them. So it just means staff don't have to go up and down stairs. So we put the units on stands. Cardboard. We have quite a lot of cardboard customers. This one is, there's 2 pictures there actually from one of our larger cardboard customers. Travel centers along the highway want to, of course, contain their cardboard so that cardboard isn't blowing out of open-top dumpsters into the windshields of cars that are going by. That's one reason. And so they've got our product in use at those locations for pure cardboard applications. Some of our customers, just a small sample of them. And I'm going to summarize our differences. So really our differences are installation, just one plug and that's it. Not even 3-phase power, single-phase power. Compaction, very high efficiency. We're at the sort of ideal part of our product life cycle. We're not 39 years old, or we're not, 1936, where we're newer technology, so we benefit from product life cycles, and that means we're earlier in that curve. Portability. If you change your property, it can be picked up and moved anywhere. Just plug it in again somewhere else. Ease of loading. Again, health and safety for tenants, for staff, for customers. It's very low load height. Ease of pickups. Picked up by a front load truck, which is the most efficient of the hauler trucks out there from a cost efficiency perspective. And then, of course, sealed waste. So nothing is going to be able to access it. We're having bear testing done in June in Kamloops. We're pretty excited to go and watch that. So basically, they'll put a couple of our units in with a couple of bears. You do black bears, then you do grizzly bears, and we're very confident that we're going to pass that. We've got that high level of confidence, but we're still interested in seeing what the grizzly bears are going to do to our unit. That's my presentation for today.